Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland, just getting over a cold, if you can't tell by the timbre of my voice. Tonight we're going over UNCUT's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, or at least that's what they claim. All right, so first of all, let's keep one thing in mind as we go over UNCUT's list tonight. This list is a multi-music genre list. You're gonna have jazz artists on this list, hip-hop, rap artists with more bling than sing. So what I wanna do is focus on the classic rock acts on this list, the albums that are on this list, and compare them to, say, other classic rock albums higher on the list. And let's see where we go from there. All right, so before I get started, I'm gonna pin in the corner here a list for you to peruse as I go through tonight's list. Now, this will move occasionally and will not be in sync with what I'm actually going over here. That's just for your reference, and you can always back up if you miss one when it occasionally moves. All right, so first of all, when I looked at this list, I couldn't help but be absolutely flabbergasted that I would have a problem with its 500th pick. Take a look at this. Crosby, Stills, Nash, 1969. You know what? This album is a rock masterpiece and would easily be in my top 30, possibly top 25 albums of all time. Now, a lot of people will claim that Deja Vu with Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young was a better album, and phonically it was. But this album, the material on this album actually weaves the listener a magic spell. I can't imagine this album being 500 on any list, to tell you the truth. But it gets worse than that. How about the Beatles here? Let It Be. All right, now Let It Be may not be one of their top 4 or even 5 albums, but it certainly would rank as maybe their 6th best, 7th best album, and we're still talking about Beatle albums that are masterpieces. A Beatle masterpiece at the number 496 position. A slap in the face if there ever was one. Of course, Randy Newman is on the wrong list. He shouldn't even be up here as far as I'm concerned. Not a Newman fan. But Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA, at number, 493, all right? Now, first of all, I know Bruce has distanced himself from this album, and the in crowd of Bruce Springsteen fans often won't bring this album up much either. Just like David Bowie fans don't have a whole lot of love for Let's Dance these days. But this is a masterpiece. This is also my favorite Bruce Springsteen album. And right beneath it is the Nebraska album. I always thought Nebraska was the lo-fi second half to this album. I cannot believe they've ranked this thing this low. Same thing at 490, Chuck Berry's After School Session, and 489, Bob Marley, Natty Dread is this low. That's almost as bad as Black Sabbath at 481, Masters of Reality. I cannot believe the Nimrod that put this list together. At number 463, David Crosby, If I Could Only Remember My Name, is a nice album, but on a list like this, I just don't understand that. Of course, Bruce Springsteen doesn't rank very high with The River at 455, and Axis Bold as Love, my friend Royce's favorite album by the Jimi Hendrix Experience, at 454. I cannot believe this. And it doesn't get any better as you go further, folks. Steely Dan's Gaucho, very low on the list at 442. And let's see, who else do we have here? Elvis Presley at 429, his Elvis Presley album from 1956. Steely Dan's Countdown to Ecstasy at 421. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon at number 411. Can somebody tell me how Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon wouldn't be in at least the top 50 of even a multi-music genre list. Now, David Bowie gets a lot of love on this list, not always for the right reasons, but David Bowie at 404, Diamond Dogs, a classic rock album. And then we get to finally Led Zeppelin at 397, Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. Many claim that's the greatest double album of all time. I claim it's the second greatest, and here it is at barely cracking the 300. David Bowie makes another appearance at 379, The Man Who Sold the World. And then it goes on, Tribe Called Quest, the Beastie Boys, the Kinks are mentioned here at 362, Something Else from their 1967 release. And here's one of my favorite albums at 359, Frank Sinatra, Songs for Swinging Lovers, 1956. I've talked about that album here on the channel. Many claim that it was that album and not Rubber Soul that was the true first album, songs created to create a mood, all right? But Rubber Soul did it first for pop, and here it is at a meager 359. Kate Bush's Ariel, her 2005 release, got to 344, and I love that album. I love Kate Bush, a big Kate Bush fan, but we all know why she's on the list, and she's on this list a couple of times. We can thank Stranger Things for that, for a resurgence in interest of her, but I don't have any problem with her being on this list, never did. Always been a fan of hers, collected every single thing she put out up until Ariel. Now we have to barely crack the top 200 to see Crosby, Stills, and Nash again, only this time they're Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Deja Vu, their 1970 release at 297. Many claiming that's an even better album than Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Fairport Convention gets a nod, and I think at a decent place here at 283, Fairport Convention, Unhalf-Bricking from 1969. A decent album, decently placed for the first time on this list. Michael Jackson's Off the Wall, I would agree with that being placed at about 271. Kate Bush, The Dreaming, all right, another rock masterpiece, and it's only at 262. But again, we know why she's even on this list, so I'm glad to see her make it more than once. Now, I'm not a major Bob Dylan, the singer, fan. I'm a great Bob Dylan, the songwriter, fan, but I know a lot of you Dylan fans are out there. Can you believe this? Bob Dylan, the freewheelin' Bob Dylan, all right, from 1963, only got as high as 251. It couldn't even crack the top half of this list. But not to fear, before we leave the top 200, we have another Led Zeppelin album. This one mentioned is their very first album, Led Zeppelin, at 223. But you know, just so Led Zeppelin doesn't feel alone, the Beatles are in the top 200 here. A Hard Day's Night. All right, first of all, that is the Beatles' very first masterpiece. 13 songs, all written by Lennon and McCartney, with Lennon writing 10 of those 13 songs. This is ludicrous, folks. Almost as ludicrous as Bob Marley at 192 for his wonderful Exodus album. Now that we're properly into the 200s, at 165, The Doors' first album. Enough said. These guys don't know what they're talking about here. At 151, Johnny Cash, American Recordings. I like that. That's a good and well-placed album on any list. At 143, Neil Young, After the Gold Rush. I guess that's fairly placed. Steely Dan's Asia at 140. Now we're getting kind of picky. That's not my favorite Steely Dan album, even though it's probably many of yours. And from my quick perusing of this list, My favorite Steely Dan album isn't even on this list, even though they made the list several times. Paul Simon's Graceland, I think, is a masterpiece. I'm glad to see it there at 134. Michael Jackson's Thriller at 116. All right, now this is a multi-genre list. This is a PC list. You would think, well, okay, now we know why it's not higher. Michael Jackson ain't seen quite the angel he once seemed. And no matter what you think of him as a person, as an artist, he deserves to be much higher on this list. I would have thought Thriller would have made the top 10 on such a list. Jeff Buckley's Grace at 97, just getting into him. Still don't have a whole lot to say. Like what I hear. That may be a fair assumption there. But you know what? When we get into this list, into the top 100, things get really bad as far as I'm concerned. Actually, starting with 101, Roxy Music, Avalon. All right, first of all, this is my favorite album by Roxy Music. I think this album is one of those near perfect albums. This album is on the level of Dark Side of the Moon or Abbey Road, folks. Avalon by Roxy Music at 101, but on a multi-genre list, maybe that's fair. I don't know. Nirvana's Nevermind at number 80 would be very high on my list in the top 25, only number 80 on this list. Radiohead, The Bends, I'm not a big Radiohead fan, but that seems about right for this list there. Which gets us to the top 50. At number 49, Neil Young, Crazy Horse, everybody knows This Is Nowhere. You know, this album has seen such a resurgence in interest over the years. I remember when I bought my first copy of this album, and I only bought it because of the price. You see, I was at a Thrifty's drugstore buying comic books. I was still buying comic books at that time. And I saw this album for 88 cents. It's now in the top 50 of all the greatest albums ever. I love it. But a travesty is at number 46, Rubber Soul. Number 46, Rubber Soul. I've already explained to you how I think this is pop rock's and probably music's really first true album, with the artist actually writing the material. See, that's the one thing that didn't happen with Sinatra. And here it gets a paltry number 46. Roxy Music, For Your Pleasure seems a little bit PC for me, but Kate Bush's Hounds of Love, thank you. This is well placed on any list. I agree with this, but I don't agree with David Bowie's Black Star. It's a great album, and especially the whole story behind it, but I don't know. I think this is up there that high. In future lists, we'll start seeing this album drop. The wounds are still fresh. We still miss David to this day. At number 4, they put the White Album, and at number 2, the Velvet Underground and Nico. Now I know there's a big fandom for the Velvet Underground. I wouldn't put them this high on anybody's list. They'd be way down on my list. They did some interesting stuff, but the second greatest album to ever be created? I doubt that. But the Beatles are at number 1 with the magnificent Revolver. All right, so now, I love the fact that Revolver is number 1 this year. And the reason I say that is because Revolver is currently my favorite Beatle album. Now, as many of my longtime viewers know, my favorite Beatle album has always been, since I've been running this channel, Rubber Soul. That's why you heard me say such harsh words over this list placement of Rubber Soul. All right, but until Rubber Soul gets its remaster, I'm going to hold off on that. And the fact that Revolver not only got a remaster, it got a remixing, and then it came out as a box set. All right, so I've been perusing this album quite a bit, folks, and so it's natural why this album, it's always been my second favorite Beatle album to begin with, all right? So it didn't go real high up on the list. But I gotta tell you, this is the only album in the history of albums that I've ever gone and actually bought the box set for it. I personally think the box set is as essential as owning the album to begin with. Of course, in the box set, you get the new stereo remix, the new mono remix, and a double album of outtakes, and a wonderful coffee table book. A great package, as I've said before. But I want to hear from all you folks, because although this wasn't a classic rock list, they did list classic rock albums in a certain order, if you just kind of went from high to low. What does this list look like to you? I want to know your thoughts on this list. What do you think? Did they cover the basics? What about their top 10? What do you think of their top 10, their top 100? What do you think of their last, number 400 to 500? What do you think of those albums? I want to hear from all of you. All right, that's the video for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. That's always good for channel growth. And if you haven't subbed to the channel, it's easy. All you have to do is hit that subscribe to the tribe button, tap that top bell icon, and you'll be notified of all my future videos. All right, folks, I'm Michael Noland. This is The Bottom Line. Starts off the way I see it, but in the comments, it's the way you and I see it, right? That's where we show everybody that we are the tribe.